Well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody, and welcome to our webinar on automated revenue management in the digital solutions economy. This is our ongoing series of webinars focused on helping companies just like yours and people take advantage of SAP Finance, whether it's treasury, revenue management, or um, leasing. And we're here today with Pete Graham from SAP. Welcome, Pete.
Thanks, John. Good to be here.
It's great to have you here. And today we will be focusing on and talking a little bit more and focusing on automated revenue management, but in the sense of the comply, optimize, transform. So with that, let me just remind everybody that the webinar is being recorded, so feel free to download it, check it out on our website, and share with others. And of course, as always, you can ask questions throughout the session. Feel free to ask those questions, put them right here into the little screen area, and you can do that. And of course, you can download previous webinars, and you can do that from our home site, Bramasol.com. Just go ahead and log in there, or check us out on Facebook, LinkedIn, or YouTube. And if you would like to, and we'd love to have you join, you can subscribe to our podcasts and webcasts through Apple iTunes or iHeartRadio. So today I've welcomed Pete. So it's just Pete and I talking about the digital solutions economy and automated revenue management. I'll talk a little bit about what is this concept of and re-emphasize the digital solutions economy. And the more we talk about it, the more we learn from you customers, and we learn from others about use cases. And we'll talk about that towards the end. We'll frame up this concept of comply, optimize, transform, and then Pete's going to take us through kind of the view of SAP with regard to automated revenue and why it matters and what it's all about. And then we'll use a couple of interesting use cases. We have 3 use cases from companies that we've dealt with and talk about them in the context more of the optimize and transform space. So with that in mind, what I'd like to talk about is the digital solutions economy and what is this digital solutions economy. For us, it's the next evolution of the subscription economy. We're all familiar with subscriptions. We all understand how those work. Whether you've had a cell phone and been using cell phones for years now, or you've had a subscription to a magazine or anything, but it's a recurring payment, a regular payment in return for goods, services, or access to a privilege. An example of that access to a privilege, of course, might be something like a gym where you get access to that. But we believe, just like SAP, and we all believe, that that's just the tip of the iceberg. Really, there are a lot of other ways in which companies are evolving their payments or business models. And those models are things like XaaS, anything as a service, whether you get infrastructure as a service or software as a service, which we're all familiar with. And of course, SAP through its RISE program offers business transformation as a service. But you pay for only what you use, and you have usually annual subscription agreements, et cetera. There's also entitlement models. Entitlement models are where you have software-based models. You can do those with companies like SAP, but you can also do it with companies like McAfee, Adobe, gaming companies like Bandai or others where you are entitled to use of additional software or additional tools. Dynamic pricing models, think Uber, but certainly VMware is a great example of dynamic pricing model. HPE offers dynamic pricing models based on the amount of servers and server space that you might use. Other companies do that based on other dynamic pricing models. And of course, we've seen those based on hotels, airplanes, and those models. Outcome-based models, where companies are based on the outcome, usage, and consumption. Think of usage and consumption really as 2 sides of a coin or 2 different ways. It's like payment up front or payment in arrears. And of course, many companies are doing that. And finally, we're seeing a lot more evolution on the idea of revenue sharing models. In fact, currently, one of the big revenue sharing models or trends that we're seeing in the marketplace, and Pete, I'll be interested in seeing, is SAP seeing this as well, but really is around in what we call in-app purchases. So think of What's an in-app purchase? Well, think of companies that offer services on their own through a website, let's say Blue Apron or US Cellular or any of these companies, but they offer services or products through a website, but they also offer it through Google or Apple or Amazon or eBay. So it's like this in-app purchase, and how do you gain that? And it's a much more dynamic marketplace, and we're seeing a lot more around this revenue sharing models. And you can see a lot of these different companies that we didn't expect. So Pete, is SAP seeing more around? I would expect you're seeing a little bit more around these revenue sharing models too.
Yeah, we are starting to see more of that, right? I mean, definitely, pandemic and everything as a service. I mean, there's a lot of just companies coming to us with questions, how do we handle all these new business models, right? Especially, of course, in the revenue recognition. That's what kind of comes
Absolutely.
across my desk. But yes, we are seeing that.
Yeah. So with all of that in mind, what we thought about and have been working on is this idea of the digital solutions economy. And it's really this idea of the customer-driven model with high flexibility. It's all about, we keep hearing this, it's all about the customer. But the customer-driven model is all about, starting with customer engagement, the customer wanting to engage with you on their terms, how they want to, the times they want, the way they want, whether they want to do it anonymously or you log in. Of course, you can, buy airplane tickets or buy food or do any of that these days through an engagement model that you log in, and you can either acknowledge who you are or buy as a guest. That, of course, drives this idea of a dynamic solution creation, management, and commerce, where customers want to be able to create their own bundles. Um, as they come in, they look at and say, well, I want this set of products mixed with this set of solutions, and I want to bundle it with a set of services. And it might be different services, different warranty levels. And how do I dynamically create those? And of course, dynamically price those models. And there's a lot of rules that go behind that. And if you check out our webinar from a couple of weeks ago, you can learn more about some of those dynamic pricing models. We talk about flexible delivery and fulfillment and how customers really want to be able to measure their own and define the terms for that. Not just about the when, but the how and the where, and have different terms available. What do they want delivered to what place and what time frame, and how does the fulfillment happen? Unified billing and invoicing is very clear. We understand everybody wants to have a bill. In fact, yesterday we were talking with a company that offers flexible billing in terms of maybe you buy a unit or buy things, but you have a rental agreement for additional capacity that you might need. Do you want single bills, separate bills? How do you want that invoiced? And customers want those options. They want flexible payments and collections, really being able to determine, how do they want to pay? Do they want to pay upfront and get a discount? Do they want to pay in arrears? Do they want to use a credit card? Cryptocurrency is another thing that we're seeing, different payment tools, and so we need to create that flexibility. And finally, obviously pricing, privacy, security, and risk. And customers want to do this simple. They want access from anywhere, anytime. They want an easy, intuitive experience, and they want helpful suggestions. They want to be able to have information throughout the entire buyer's journey or buyer's cycle, where we're making suggestions on, what might you want to bundle together? What are other customers using? What are some of the flexible delivery options, et cetera? So what does this mean for companies like you? What does this mean for companies in general? Well, what it means is SAP and Bramasol have begun to bring together this vision of a holistic approach. And today we're going to focus heavily on the automated revenue management, but understand that the automated revenue management is tied almost inextricably with these other spaces, right? Because you can't do revenue accounting and revenue reporting without understanding who the customer is and how they're engaging. You can't build POBs and bundles without understanding pricing and quoting and configuration. You have to have solution order management and different tools to do that. It's driven by supply chain and logistics, so that when you recognize something that happens, it drives the fulfillment of that item. and financing an invoice that runs separately. Again, we've had many different conversations about customers about that, particularly in the subscription space, and the flexibility about and implications to cash and treasury management. And if, our customers and the conversations we've had have talked about hyperscaler platforms. SAP, of course, offers a fantastic opportunity for you to really take advantage of the power of SAP in the RISE portfolio and the RISE plan, where they can help you manage and kind of take that burden off of you of managing your infrastructure. But if you choose to do it, yep, you can do that too. We have the Fiori UI UX that allows the flexibility and integration to all of these. And of course, companies like yours and others want this analysis and analytics, and SAP offers that holistic piece. And the other aspect of this, and we'll talk about this when we talk about comply, optimize, transform use cases, is that customers may not want all of this at once, or they may want some from SAP and some from other companies. And we offer, because of the way SAP is constructed and the way Bramasol works with SAP, we can create different on-ramps and different solution views for you. So I know, Pete, we've talked about this a few times. Any thoughts from you on that?
Yeah, I mean, no, I think you hit all the main points. I mean, definitely, we work with a lot of customers that, of course, have complex operations across all these areas, and they have, SAP and non-SAP systems, right? So we have to offer solutions that fit in not only to the complexity across the 6 areas you've shown and different commutations and permutations of that, as well as taking in their landscapes, right? So it's kind of like the ultimate Rubik's Cube, so to speak, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So with that in mind, I want to talk a little bit about a concept that we've been out there with, and Pete and I and the team have been pushing, not pushing, but engaging with for, oh gosh, Pete, now what, 5-6 years now. We've been talking about the concept of comply, optimize, and transform. And I
And
think
it
that this is really
resonates
important.
well, right? When we have these, when we used to have the in-person workshops frequently, this is how it started, right? And it just seems to resonate and be easy to explain, and customers can tell exactly kind of where they are along this framework, right?
Exactly. And a question came up, in the chat, and thank you for that question around volumes. And Pete, I think you're going to talk about this idea, and we'll when we get to it, about complexity and density and volumes. And so we'll talk about that in a moment.
Yeah.
But let's, it really has resonated. And why did we start with comply? Well, we kept with comply, optimize, transform because it's real catchy. It comes out, but it's really, in comply, what you're doing is creating the foundation for finance transformation with transactional excellence. What does that mean? Well, when you think of compliance, it can be anything. We focus in, of course, from a revenue accounting perspective on ASC 606 and IFRS 15. But what it really means is that your accounting transactions, your basic transactions, are accurate, appropriate, and that the journal entries that come out of it are within the appropriate GAAP regulations, and that you're following other regulatory compliance areas such as SOX, meaning SOX, SOX compliance, SOC compliance, ICFR, which is your internal controls for financial reporting. All of those, what you really want to make sure is at the very base, the transactions are being calculated properly. And of course, from a revenue accounting perspective, no tool, in our opinion, does that better than SAP RAR, which was really built from the ground up to leverage the 5-step model and align to that. Right, Pete?
Yes. I mean, certainly the roots of revenue recognition, revenue accounting and reporting are from the original IFRS 15 standard, right, in the ASC 606 standard. So in those, I think it was a memorandum of understanding and then became kind of a working paper. I mean, we were involved. We had, an accountant that was part of those discussions. Our chief accounting officer at the time was sitting on one of the boards of those groups. And so that we started from the beginning, right, at the regulation side, and then the product was designed around you know, what best will be able to handle that regulation.
Exactly. Yeah. And so once you've complied or you've built that transactional excellence, you begin to look at the idea of optimization. How do I optimize? And the idea is to build operational excellence through process improvement and automation. What does this really mean in practice? Well, what we see companies doing, and we'll talk about some use cases in a little bit, is once I know that I've complied, how do I begin to knit together the overall process and create process improvement? Maybe I've done compliance manually, maybe I've done it in small business units, or it's just there's a lot of um, heavy lifting that has to happen. How do I combine or connect my project systems and my project areas and my cost accounting and the other areas of my business? We talked about this in the concept of the DSE, right? Where you want to connect your commerce, your CPQ, and your billing and invoicing all together and be able to rationalize that or optimize that across a process. This is all about process improvement. And of course, tools like RAR and automated revenue management are really designed to help you simplify and automate those processes. And then finally, it's about transformation and digital transformation. And this is where you're driving organizational excellence, is what we call it. The idea is you're not just looking at what you do today and how do I improve it, but taking the tools that you have, the information that's provided through a solution like automated revenue management, RAR, to help you innovate and drive transformation. What we're seeing is more and more companies driving new recurring revenue business models and using the information that they get out of their revenue accounting solutions to innovate and drive new business models. Cases where we see companies that are in the medical device industry or in, oddly enough, concrete and manufacturing businesses, where they're moving away from selling a device to maybe a consumption-based model or a usage-based model, where the usage of that particular piece of equipment, let's say it's a valve or a wellhead, for example, where you're no longer charging for the individual unit, but rather based on the gallons, if you will, or millions of gallons of oil barrels of oil that might flow through that particular unit. Ships, where you might be focused on, usage-based model based on containers or miles of containers. And of course, trucking industry has done this for years, where you have fully loaded containers, half loaded containers, empty containers, all of that. So, it's this building a transformative model. So what's the big deal, and I like to use this phrase, the big so what, and it's really, to do this, you need a transformative tool like automated revenue management. And so Pete, maybe you can talk a little bit about comply, optimize, transform from your perspective, and then we'll dive into, kind of your slides on automated revenue management.
Sounds good. Yeah, and the goal here again is just to give you a little bit of background before we dig into some of the case studies and talk about some of the strategies of trying to go from comply to optimize, transform. I mean, this is a natural maturity, so call it a journey framework, call it a maturity matrix. I mean, most customers, had to deal with the new standard from a compliance standpoint, but from the other side, everybody's managing revenue, right? So there's always some way of tracking it, but now it's become a lot more, with the new regulations, let's say a little more complicated, right, with all the new rules. And so this framework really came out of just working with customers and seeing that there's this natural evolution that you're going to comply, but then there's always room for improvement, right? The tools are improving, the processes are improving, right? The folks learning curve, I mean, all these things are in the mix. And then of course you have the transformation, and you think about, as the IT folks or business folks look at the architecture of their business, right? You see that from both sides. There might be a need to kind of do a transformation or a leapfrog, and we've seen that with customers that might be on really old ERPs and they jump to the cloud, or we've also, and this is where, John, I think you and I have seen almost every type of situation there is, right? We've seen
Yeah,
some customers, rush to comply and then improve it down the road and
right.
then go through transformation now, right? So
Yeah,
I think, yeah,
and it's been driven by lots of different um, external forces in the marketplace, right? Through whether
yeah.
they're doing it, and we'll talk about them in the use cases, but there are lots of different reasons for that. So yeah,
Yeah. So then I think that, the automated revenue management solutions from SAP and revenue accounting reporting is one of them is, we kind of tried to build in that optimization piece, or as much as possible, build in that, simplify and automate, right, your revenue accounting. That's our goal, right, to automate and simplify. And so we kind of build that in as much as possible.
Mhm.
You can always have more, always do more, but then we get into some cases where things have changed so much that you need to make kind of a bigger step, right? And
Yeah.
that's a transformation. Maybe a customer goes from an old ERP right to S4, or maybe they
Exactly.
go from an initial revenue accounting reporting on classic contract and decide to jump to S4 on optimized
Hmm.
contract management, right? So those are
Exactly.
examples of some step
Yep.
changes, right, that you see
Sure.
in the transformation.
Yep.
So I think if you go now to the next slide, we talk a little bit about automated revenue management and really how the automated revenue management solutions from SAP are powered by really our S4 Intelligent Enterprise. And at the core of that is in-memory technology, universal journal. And really, we think it's industrial strength revenue recognition software that has integration excellence and process interoperability or connectedness, meaning that we have our own process that we fit into within the SAP, landscape, but also we can pull in things from third party. And you also saw that in John's slide up front where we had the 6 different areas. So we have to be able to have this end-to-end process scope, but also with SAP and non-SAP data in mind. And that's, this S4HANA Intelligent Enterprise allows us to do that. Second, you'll know the interoperability, right? You've got lines moving between the different swim lanes, and we're decoupled, right? We're decoupled from some of these. So there's a link, but not necessarily a hard link, right? So from the billing systems, right? If you want to bill and recognize revenue independently or differently, you can do it, right? We don't force you to do it one way. We can handle multiple ledgers. We've got
Right.
analytics that are embedded that provide the instant insights and real-time profitability analysis through Universal Journal. And of course, Universal Journal is kind of the single source of truth with all this. So if we go to the next slide, we talk a little bit about the flexibility that come from, sorry, go to the next slide and we'll jump back to this one. Oh, did we miss one? Sorry, was there a miss one?
No.
Okay, so there were, sorry, go back to, I thought we had another slide on just, so if we look now at the automated revenue management and differentiators, certainly there's a couple that we see, and I wanted to point these out because customers can use these to their advantage to solve some of the key use cases that we're going to come up and talk about here shortly. So one is certainly real time. So certainly in the latest versions of S4, we've added a lot of real-time capabilities around the processing of both inbound and outbound data, and even automatic postings to the journals if you want in real time at a very granular level. Sorry, did you have a question, John?
No. I was just wondering about the slide. I saw that I missed your thing. So
Oh, okay. um, then we have the rules and events driven concept and really paradigm. So that adds flexibility. So from the beginning, you saw that comply optimize. We're always thinking about that optimization step. And so we built in business rules and events driven frameworks. But we see a lot of complexity. We have a huge diversity of the spectrum of requirements from low complexity and low volume and light density all the way to high volume, high complexity accounting and high density. I mean, we have contracts with literally thousands and thousands, some cases tens of thousands of performance obligations. And some customers need more than what's maybe easily available out of the box. So we do have technology extensions that allows customers to amplify that, right? To take the current business rules framework and amplify it or boost it, right? By adding, and adding these extensions or enabling these extensions. So we do support these diverse requirements across the spectrum.
Right.
We have a lot of strong accounting capabilities built in because some of our accountants that worked on the original standards, IFRS 15 especially, gave feedback and now are still working on the product. And with it embedded analytics through S/4HANA, we really can get a lot of instant insights. And we have the telco picture over there because literally we have lots of high tech and lots of telco, right? So look at that picture, think of satellites and high tech and high telco, but we have lots of customers, dozens and dozens in each of those industries. So that's also, they're successful, but they've given us a lot of good product feedback that's now built into the latest version of the product, like the day-based calculations that we just introduced. So if we go to the next slide, we talk a little bit about, I believe this is SAP, right? So SAP, we eat our own dog food or run. Maybe just click it one more time, John. I think there's a build there. There you go, thanks. So you're right, we eat our own dog food, drink our own champagne. They were our first customer. They started small in a couple areas of the business, but for the last couple of years, they've covered the whole business. They deal with any of the companies that we would merge or buy. They bring that data in very quickly because we built in migration. And so see, these are some of the use cases, and I use this slide because it's a very solid customer story. It shows how we're complying and transforming right at the same time, so it's easily to understand the paradigm. There's a lot of use cases here that many customers can relate with, right? So we're doing a lot of these, and of course, the pay-as-you-go and the digital solution economy type business models are certainly coming up more and more. But this is, I think, is a good backdrop now as we start to talk about, the use cases that John has prepared for us to go through.
Absolutely. And Pete, the having, the evolution and the robustness of the SAP solution really has been brought out through all of this integration and the benefits. And as we see, you talked about one thing, day-based calculations, but there's so much more, and
Oh yeah.
all more that's in there, about the flexibility and the power of RAR to support so many different businesses. I mean, we must get involved in at least 8, 9, 10 different industries across, and certainly RAR supports all of those different industries and all of those different types of activities. So it's just been great.
Yeah, I mean, and I think it just reinforces. I mean, we have more slides we could cover right in another session, but we really have seen over the last 10 years working on RAR and really automated revenue management topic is just a huge diversity of requirements. It really runs a spectrum, and the complexity of your implementation is really going to mirror the complexity of your requirements in your industry, right? And so we had to build RAR to be flexible to manage all this, right? So
Yeah,
and every
and
day
I think that's one of the powers of RAR. Before we dive into real quick, is when we meet with customers and we talk with customers, out of the box, RAR brings so much power, but it's flexibility and scalability. You talked about that density idea, Pete, early on, the density and complexity. You can have a very simple transaction and simple companies. We have companies that do very straightforward models where they provide a subscription for a service, like it could be a simple software model, or it could be a simple license to use a particular type of fonts or things like that. It's a very simple model, all the way up to highly complex models from gaming companies, surprisingly, Google, Apple, and many others who have extremely complex multi-element arrangements and can have thousands. And the beauty is that RAR certainly is built to sustain that and support that. So,
Yeah, and definitely in S4, right? That was one of our
yep,
goals really to improve, right? And, you know, with the optimized product areas that have been introduced, right, on the inbound processing, the posting, um, and that enabled us to do day-based calculations as well as just handle those contract densities that are higher and the volumes that are higher with more ease, right? So
right. And
that's
then
just
yeah, and we don't mention, think of the integration, the seamless integration between Brim, and of course Brim
yep.
is not just a product, it's a portfolio of products, but there's the integration into the FICA, which is your contract accounting, handles those high volume models, and it's just the flexibility. So all right, so let's talk about some of these use cases for a moment. We'll start with something that was pretty straightforward. Our client here, it was an optimization for a high technology company. The challenge that they had was they had originally complied. They had done ASC 606, but they wanted a better view and more insights into their costs. And they wanted a single way as they began to, Pete, you mentioned this early on, companies acquiring businesses. And when they acquire businesses, they may or may not have a single invoicing or a single even ERP that generates the sales orders. And what we were able to do with this company and this business was to allow them to bring in this new organization that was on a different ERP, but integrate that and give them a holistic picture of not only um, their revenues, but the costs associated with that. And I think that's a typical scenario that you see in the market too, right?
Yes, it is. Yes.
Yeah.
uh, I mean, certainly, um, again, these customers are on a journey, right? There's always, it's always pressure to improve, but the business is moving, the markets are moving, right? Business models you've seen,
Absolutely.
and once they get up and running or comply, um, they start to see there's more benefits. Also, the nature of the standard is a lot different, right? It's very granular, right? You have to chop up your revenue streams into these
Mhm.
performance obligations. And what some customers realized early on, and I think more are realizing it still today, is that really really almost begs you to data mine all that data, right? So all these performance obligations very granular. Once it becomes revenue, if you can link it back, and that's why that integration with Brim is sometimes very beneficial for customers. You now have a very good way to data mine and say, here's all the revenue chunks that different marketing campaigns are driving or different customer interests are driving. And now you have
Exactly.
a very good way of kind of looking at kind of where your buying patterns are, right? So that's why it becomes more than just compliance, is that you do have this, you do have to go through a lot of regulatory steps, but at the end of the day, you now have performance obligations by installments that are now in a database that you can mine and tie back to your customer choices or business model choices.
Exactly. And you mentioned the Universal Journal, but I would say the Universal Journal powered by S/4HANA or HANA, the HANA database, really is what drives even more ability to mine that data and get the insights that you wanted.
Yeah, I
Uh,
mean, really, it's almost, you call it one for one or lights out finance or real-time
right.
finance, but literally every time I ship a widget or do an in-app purchase or do a subscription, sell it, or a month goes by or whatever the time element is,
Mm.
your financials are updating in real time, right? So it's
Yep.
it's really quite quite cool when you see that happening, right?
It
You're
is.
really
It
getting a
is.
pulse on your business.
Yeah. And we're going to talk a moment about a wireless company that went through what they want to do is optimize and transform kind of in a almost a simultaneous step. They're not leapfrogging or jumping over. They're doing optimize, transform kind of in a 1-2 punch, if you will. But I know when I worked for AT&T many years ago, um, we had things like take rates and upgrades, or company, where you wanted to see, well, did they really take advantage of an upgrade? And it was hard to know. Um, Now with the way revenue accounting, and of course you have the revenue screen in RAR, that's just awesome, where you can get insights into, well, what are my unfulfilled performance obligations, and do I need to take action in the marketplace to encourage companies to take advantage of that? So, excuse me, there's lots there. This wireless company is a great wireless telco company is a great example of somebody who wanted to optimize and transform. The challenge they had early on, and they were an early adopter of SAP RAR, and they complied fairly early on, but they had a lot of complex um, processes, and they had what we call proprietary customer engagement platforms. Imagine how many different customers will have their own. Apple, of course, has its own platforms, but companies like Discover or many others will have their own proprietary engagement platforms where they help customers engage and order things, but they need to flow that through order management. And what this company was specifically looking for is, it was taking them a long time to bring offers to the marketplace because they really had to understand and connect the offers to the sales and distribution aspects and the provisioning of those offers, and test all of that, and then understand the complex RAR calculations. And what we've been doing with them is helping them optimize this process. And the idea is to go from a business that takes months to get offers into the marketplace into days and weeks to get new offers into the marketplace based on dynamic information that they're seeing in the marketplace today. And the idea is that they have this proprietary CEP or engagement platforms, but they need to link multiple orders with various entitlements, right? So again, imagine that you have even a small company where you might have 100 different users. How do I know who has access to what, and what's their platform, and how do I engage with them, right? So you need to bring that through, automate the revenue accounting, but do it in a way that's rules driven, and then reduce that time to market, but do it in a place that's extremely high volumes. We're talking about a customer that has tens of millions of invoices and bills every month. Tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions, but it's probably in the tens of millions number. How do you do that? And of course, what they wanted to do, and we're working with them on, is that direct connection. And only RAR, automated revenue, allows you to do that. And so what they've been wanting to do or look to do is, first, how do I optimize the integration of these processes together in such a way that allows me, and really honestly, we also have the fulfillment aspects of it, right? Because once you've ordered a phone, it's only once you turn that phone on and you fulfill that, that you're now linking it to that revenue recognition. So it's really all four of these areas, maybe even five with the billing and invoicing. But right, so it's how do I optimize these processes, link them together smoothly, create a single view of a customer, do it in a high volume marketplace, but then the transformative nature is, yeah, I used to do this in months. Now I need to do it, test it in the marketplace, and be able to roll out in a matter of 2 to 3 weeks. And so think of how that transforms wireless. And I know, Pete, you and I have talked about this customer, but we've also talked about it in terms of other large telcos, but also other large service providers, if you will. Can you comment on what you're seeing?
Yeah, so I think this is a common scenario, right? I mean, all customers have this challenge of, how do they go to market more easily, or how do they go to market more effectively, right? And so there's a strategic aspect as well as and kind of the operational aspect. And once your strategy is
Mhm.
selected, then you got to implement it, right? And so um, one challenge is just implementing it efficiently, right? And if you're not properly set up and don't have the flexibility, you can't do it. Also, if your strategy keeps changing and you don't have the flexibility, you eventually end up with, kind of spaghetti, I guess you might want to call it. And that's also a challenge too, right? And so we do run into that as well, where we've gone to customers where they've had so many changes, they really have a system that is designed for lots of different processes, and then you have to come in and optimize different areas to really get not only the productivity back up, but the focus on the right information that you need, right? Because literally ran into a customer that over the time had created so many different types of reporting information that they kind of blew up their ledger, right? They got
Yes.
to the point where the ledger had so many entries in it, most of them were not valuable anymore, right? So in that case, that was a transformation project, right? We had to go in, take all the accounts that were no longer useful, drop them, and then in the new Universal Journal, just put the ones that were of interest, and made a huge improvement, right? So, but yeah, I think a lot of customers have these challenges, and again, you got to have the right strategy. Then you have to make sure you have the right flexibility to implement
Mhm.
that strategy, right?
Yeah, and we see this, we talk about telcos and services. Media companies are another example. We can think of all of different kinds of media companies that are out there, gaming companies,
Yep.
as all of these move to those um, models that require that level of flexibility, right? So, absolutely.
Yeah. Business model changing, and they got to get to it quickly, right? If they don't have the right infrastructure in place, the finance teams, the back office teams really struggle, right, keeping up.
Exactly. Yep. And finally, we have models, this idea of transformation, and I picked kind of what I think is an interesting opportunity or interesting idea um, in the healthcare space, and we've run into several of these companies as we've worked, and this company really wanted to jump over. They had been doing a lot of manual compliance. Um, they could have started with a process by which they might optimize. Um, use a tool like RAR to help simplify and automate, um, create some automated um, activities. But what they decided they wanted to do was really leapfrog over that and jump into and understand how can they support their subscription models and create a foundation for a transformative business. They may not have the majority of their revenue there today or even in 6 to 8 months, but where they visualize their business going is a year, 2, 3, 4 down the road, where a subscription style business, a rental business, a leasing business, all of those might represent more than 60% of their ongoing revenue, as opposed to maybe it's 5 or 10% today. And so what they've been looking at is, how do I bring SAP RAR into my S/4HANA transformation and leverage that insights and leverage the analytics to drive subscription models for medical devices, simplify their revenue accounting, and create this idea of multi-level entitlements for schemas, right? So maybe you create like a company like, we can pick one like Siemens, for example. It's an interesting company, right? They do enormous medical devices that include so many different configurations that can be used differently during different operations. They might move to a usage-based model. And so what they wanted to get to is this transformative idea. And so you see a use case where a company moves away from an incremental journey into just a leapfrog into true transformation using automated revenue management. And the power of RAR to be integrated to tools such as BRIM, subscription order management, SAP sales and distribution, um, and a lot of the standard tools that are available through SAP, or using proprietary. We talked about app-based purchases, indirect channels, um, and all of that, of course, is supported through SAP. And then underlying all of that becomes all of these analytics for insight to action. And SAP provides, through RAR and through other tools like SAP Analytics Cloud, a tremendous opportunity for you to really gain insights across this entire spectrum. And of course, being the deep experts that we are in revenue accounting, we've worked with SAP, but have developed our own dashboards and disclosure tools for companies to leverage and gain even more insights, creating a simple one-two way, a almost easy button, if you will, for your FASB and your IASB filings, but it adds so many more dimensions to that with dashboards. So, maybe Pete, you can talk about others that you see really, how are you seeing companies just jumpstart instead of, making incremental improvements, they're really jumping in and transforming their businesses.
Yeah, I mean that certainly is possible. I think a lot of these companies, it would then have to look at kind of a process optimization or process transformation. And then with the jump to S4, you're using those additional tools of flexibility and real-time nature, right, to kind of allow you to redesign those processes in a much more efficient way, right? And so that's kind of what we're seeing. And certainly customers then benefit from the real-time nature, right? The instant
Mm-hmm.
insights, the embedded analytics, and the single source of truth on the universal journal. I mean, so those are real benefits, right? You show those to accountants saying, look, you're not waiting for the posting anymore. And when you drill down to the document, you're seeing the actual results in real time, and you're not running a batch process, right, to get
Yeah.
the final view. So
Yeah. And
yes, yes, and yes to all
yes,
those.
yes, and yes. Yes.
And but it's always a little bit of fine line. I mean, if you have a crazy business process, there's only so much automation can do. So typically, what we see customers doing, it's a little bit of you know um, each side, right? If you can simplify the process itself, if it's physical, right, that still then allows you to automate it more easily, right? So usually there's a little bit of both in these financial, or I should say, any kind of transformation projects.
Exactly. And but I think the beauty to me in the years that we've been doing this now is we originally started this as a compliance journey, and I'm going to kind of wrap this all together and then go to a wrap up slide in a moment. But early on, everybody struggled and moved as quickly as possible just to comply. But what we quickly learned from all of these projects, from the simplest projects up to the hugely complex transformations in which, Fortune 100 company reinvents itself using S/4HANA, and at the same time splits into 2 or 3 different entities, acquires another company, but all of that was able to be handled and integrated through SAP. But the point being, as they moved through this compliance journey, um, SAP formed, and whether they used SAP or non-SAP products, it all was able to come into one place and give them a unique perspective on their business that they didn't have before, because they started having to use things like performance obligations, understand the nature and interaction of those. You saw the advent of tools like standalone selling price, where that's a crucial part of the 5-step model, and SAP allows the flexibility of using multiple models. And of course, we've developed a tool based on SAP flexibility and extensibility to give you an automated process for doing multiple approaches to standalone selling price, or flexibility to offer and go to market in a lessor accounting space in which you might have both finance and operating leases. So again, to me, it's the flexibility of the RAR, automated revenue accounting tools, that began to reach back into these other areas and force you to think about these optimized processes, but imagine transformation. And I don't think any of this, would it have been possible? Sure. But what this process has brought in is a lens and a laser focus in on the need to do this through tools and approaches like, digital solutions economy. So, all right. So with that, Pete, let's wrap up.
Okay.
I think, I would walk away. We talked about the digital solutions economy and why is this important and why is the process so important? Well, number one, we know that through COVID, but has really accelerated a model that was moving ahead. Stitch Fix and Chewy and Birchbox and Blue Apron, they were all services that were there before. But what we've seen is the application of those style business models outside of the B2C and more seeing them pulled into a B2B environment where customers want flexibility in how to interact and transact, which has forced companies to look at new business models, but also to think about their current business models and say, how do I take my fundamental business and expand into these new subscription or usage-based models? I know that SAP ARM or Automated Revenue Management is flexible and scalable. Maybe you can talk, maybe give a hint. We're going to talk over the next couple of months, Pete, in a couple of our webinars and upcoming podcasts about some of the new what's out there. You mentioned optimized contract management and it's really two things, I guess: optimized contract management and optimized inbound processing. And I think that those tools really help customers like this in this space. And can you talk a little bit about those and what's happening in 2020 and 2021 to help customers even more?
Sure. So, our automated revenue management portfolio, right, is really designed to cover, the broad set of requirements across the spectrum. And as part of that, we realized a couple of years ago that the business, the economy was going more digital, and so we had to move our solution to be more real time. So in order to do that, plus enable some improvements in flexibility, as well as being able to manage the higher contract densities and volumes that we're seeing, out in the real world, we decided we needed to make some, call it, data model changes on the contracts that we manage internally within the tool, right? And so that has manifested into a new solution that came out. Actually, it's a new part of the solution that came out in, I think it's 2019, called Optimized Contract Management. And then in 2020, we then used that to build in the real-time inbound processing. And in 2021, we're using it in the Universal Journal to add optimized outbound processing, which is the posting side, right? So basically now you have a much more, flexible, scalable solution that's real time, right? As real time as you can get. So, the core RAR solution is still there. You can move to S4, but if you move to S4, there's really a lot more tools now available that you can opt in or pick up, and it really helps you to be more flexible and scalable.
Absolutely. Great. So with that, I want to thank you, Pete. As always, it's a pleasure.
Thanks, John. Yep, no problem. It's great being here and talking about this topic. It's always an interesting topic with you to cover. Yep.
Yeah, and we'll look forward. We have some more coming up. Podcasts. Look for some more broadcasts from all of us. Next month, we will be talking a little bit more, Pete. I think we're going to focus on, for those of you who are interested in the cloud, we're going to talk a bit about revenue accounting in the cloud. Whatever that cloud thing is, Pete, that cloud thing.
Yes.
So, but, I want to encourage everybody to act now. Understand that companies are out there changing their business models. You've heard about a few of those changes. You can comply, optimize, and transform, but you can't do that if you sit around waiting for somebody else. So I encourage you, reach out, talk to Pete, talk to myself, reach out to Bramasol and other companies like SAP about how you can really transform your customer experience. We'd love to talk with you about the digital solutions economy and the case studies and things that we're seeing in the marketplace that can help you transform your business. So with that, again, Pete, thanks. And everybody, I want to quote a good friend of mine as I wrap this up. And Don't wait for it to happen. You make it a great day. Thank you and have a good one.